Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be using the Bouquet of Roses stencil from Simon Says Stamp. This was released just last week and I've been itching to use it. I'm going to protect my work surface by rolling out a Tonic Easy Clean mat so I can use this while I'm doing some ink blending over that stencil. So I'm first going to tape my piece of cardstock to the stencil. I do this for a couple of reasons. One, you always want to tape your cardstock to your stencil to your cardstock so it doesn't move around while you're blending. And also, I taped it to the back of the cardstock so that I could blend all the way off the corners of this cardstock and not have to worry about any tape masking the corners. So I've taped it down to my work surface too so things don't slide around. And then I'm going to be using 4 different colors of Distress Oxide ink. I'm going to start with the color Abandoned Coral, and I'm using some life-changing blending brushes from Picket Fence Studio, I think it is. And I'm going to start blending these over the flowers. I want the flowers to be this nice abandoned coral shade, and then I'll be adding some additional color on top using Seedless Preserves. But for now, I just want the flowers to be a really, really soft coral shade. I then moved to Seedless Preserves, and I used the same brush for this since the colors were similar enough. And I just blended from the center of the flowers. Wanted to make sure there was still some of that coral color on the outer edges of each flower. I just wanted to intensify the center area of each flower. After I had the flowers all pretty much blended, I then came in with Peeled Paint Distress Oxide ink. I use this for all of the leaves around this entire stencil design. And you'll also notice that I moved to a slightly smaller blending brush, and that's so that I can get into all those little tiny leaves that are in between the flowers without getting this green color on the flowers themselves. I remember when I first used these blending brushes and I showed the whole group of them on camera, there were a few people in the comments that questioned the really, really small brushes. They couldn't figure out why you would ever need such small brushes, and this is exactly why. When you're doing stencils like this and you only want to add color to one area, it's really nice to have a small brush like this so that you can get into all those itty bitty crevices. So after I had all of the green leaves blended in, I then grabbed Peacock Feathers Distress Oxide ink, and I used the absolutely smallest blending brush to add detail coming from the center area where the leaf would be attached. I wanted the darkest shade to come up from that. So this is another time when having a very itty-bitty blending brush like this would come in handy. I don't think I could do such precise blending of color using that really, really large blending brush that I used earlier, even for those roses. I think it probably would have overshot and I would be putting this peacock feathers color onto the flowers as well. I then removed the stencil, and when I removed the stencil, I realized that I missed that kind of glowing effect from the stencil. So I decided I would go ahead and add some of that back in using my blending brushes. So I added some abandoned coral right over those roses, just adding a little bit of color back in. And I also did the same with peeled paint. I wanted that kind of glowing, soft effect coming from the leaf areas as well. To add a little bit of detail to the centers of the flowers, I took a white Gelly Roll pen. This is a number 10 bold Gelly Roll pen, and I added 3 little dots to the center of all of these flowers. And this is just going to give it a little bit more detail. I realized that this stencil, while beautiful, was fairly simple. It didn't have a whole lot of detail to it, and I wanted to have this design of the roses and leaves really be the focal point of my card behind the greeting. And so I thought adding little bits of detail would be perfect. So I used a dark green colored pencil. This is a Polychromos pencil from Faber-Castell, and I came in with a very thin, dainty line. Did one line down the center of each leaf, and then did some little branching lines coming off from the center as well. And this gives it just enough detail and adds a little bit of depth. Something so simple, a very thin line in comparison to these bold, very large leaf and floral shapes. I think it's a nice contrast and makes it even more interesting to look at. So after I had this entire background finished and completed, I created my card base. I used some Classic Crest, this is Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. This is the 110-pound weight, and I scored that at 5.5 to create a top folding card. I then put some Tombow Extreme adhesive on the back and then press that down directly onto the card front. As far as the greeting goes for this card, I'm going to be using another new product from Simon that came out last week. This is Tiny Words Encouragement. I really love the Tiny Words stamp sets. I love them because I like to have very small greetings on my cards. And I'm going to stamp this onto some vellum. I've already prepped my vellum with an anti-static powder tool, and then I stamped the greeting in Versamark ink. I'm going to be applying some white embossing powder. In this case, it's Alabaster embossing powder from Burtis Monroe, and I tapped and shook off the excess and then heat set that with my heat tool until it was smooth and melted. Now, my plan for this at this point was to have the greeting go directly over those flowers, and I knew that it would need a little bit more I didn't want it quite as translucent, and so I had planned to double up on the vellum and have 2 layers of vellum. So I ran that little greeting through my Xyron Create-A-Sticker machine so that it would have adhesive on every single bit of the back of that vellum, and then I adhered it down onto that vellum again so that it had 2 layers of vellum. Now, this is, as I've discovered over the last little bit, if you guys have been watching my videos, you know this, putting adhesive on the back of a piece of vellum, having the adhesive cover the entire area, is the best way to adhere vellum without any adhesive showing. So at this point, I realized that 2 layers of vellum wasn't going to be enough, and so I added a third. I adhered it a third time and then used my scissors to trim out this little tiny narrow strip of a greeting. So 3 layers of vellum is just enough to give this a very pale gray tone, but then also let that floral background shine through. So otherwise I would have just used a very pale piece of gray cardstock, but I wanted that floral pattern to come through a little bit. So for the third time, I ran it through my Xyron machine and then pressed that down onto the front of the card. And that finishes the card for today. Super simple and easy. I loved adding all of those details to the rose bouquet stencil design, and I think it turned out really, really great. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I'll be back very soon with another card to show you guys, and thanks so much for watching.